We spend a lot of time learning, understanding ideas, concepts, frameworks. But there's a gap that most people never cross. The gap between understanding something and actually living it. In the language of Torah, that gap is the difference between Bina and Das. Bina is when something makes sense. Das is when what you understand and how you actually live are aligned. When what you know becomes the way you experience and respond to reality. This series is about closing that gap, taking ideas that we understand intellectually and turning them into something real, something lived, something that shapes how we see everything that happens in our lives. We'll be working with Torah teachings that approach this with precision and structure, not just what to believe, but how reality actually works and how to operate within it correctly. So this is not a series about inspiration. It's a series about process, a structured path from Bina to Das. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema Podcast, an installment in our series from Bina to Das. You know, something that's come up quite often on this podcast, from me and the various rabbis I've had on, is that the word Torah means instructions. Instructions, meaning this is a guidebook, the 613 mitzvos, and how to apply them. And that makes sense. The purpose of Torah is to tell us how to live. However, if the purpose of Torah is to tell us how to live, then we would expect it to be very direct, clear. Do this, don't do that, almost like a manual. So here's the question. If Torah is instructions, why is so much of it stories? Why do we need Abraham leaving his home, Yaakov dealing with Laban, Joseph going down to Egypt, the entire story, the Exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, the years in the wilderness? If the goal is instructions, just give the instructions. And on the flip side, if the stories are the point, if they're there to inspire us, to teach emunah, to give us perspective, then why do we need all the detailed laws? Why both? I think most people, without consciously realizing it, end up leaning one way or the other. Either we relate to Torah as a system of laws, or we relate to it as a collection of meaningful stories. But it's very easy to read it in a way that misses what it's trying to do. And that is something I've been trying to work on in this series, especially in episodes that I released a few weeks ago called Living Between Yaakov and Yisrael. To stop reading the Torah like it's a third-person story, like we're watching something happen to someone else, like it's a Netflix series. Because the moment we read it that way, we've already disconnected from what it's trying to do. The Torah is not telling us what happened. It's showing us what's happening right now to us, in our decisions, in our reactions, in our struggles. On one level, these are real events and real people in our history. But on another level, they are not just history. They're also templates for how we live. Egypt is not a place, it's a state. The splitting of the Sea of Reeds is not just an event, it's an experience. And once we start to see that, the question changes. It's no longer, why does the Torah include stories? The question becomes, what are these stories doing that the laws alone can't? And the answer to that is the key to understanding how a person actually moves from Bina to Das. We've been talking in this series about the gap between understanding something, Bina, and actually living it, Das. Bina is when something makes sense. Das is when the understanding actually shapes how we experience our lives, how we respond, how we think, how we feel in real time. And we've been using the redemption story as the model for that process. Egypt, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, Mount Sinai, the wilderness, not as history, but as a system that shows us how a person moves from confusion to clarity to actually living with that clarity. But here's the piece most of us miss. The Torah is not organized as information. It's organized as a process. And that process has two parts, the narrative and the mitzvos. And each one does something completely different. The narrative teaches us how to interpret what is happening in our lives, what's really going on beneath the surface, where Hashem is in it, and what it's asking from us. And the mitzvos train us how to respond to that reality consistently, not just when we feel inspired. And we need both, because without the narrative, we can keep all the mitzvos and not change. And without the mitzvos, we can feel inspired and nothing will stick. Let's get back to the redemption model. Egypt is not just physical slavery, it's a way of seeing reality. A person is trapped in what we see, cause and effect, the klipa, nature, pressure, fear. Life feels random or overwhelming or controlled by everything around us. Then comes the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, a moment of absolute clarity. At that moment, the Torah describes a reality where the people didn't just believe in Hashem, they saw it clearly. Not believed, not hoped, saw. Meaning it became completely clear. There was no confusion about what was happening or who was behind it. Hashem is running everything. There is nothing else. And we all have moments like that. Moments where something clicks, where we see clearly, where we feel aligned. But then comes the wilderness. And this is where everything either builds or falls apart. Because the midbar, the wilderness, is not lacking revelation. It's filled with it. Manna appears daily, water from a rock, protection surrounding them. So what's the test? The test is not whether Hashem exists. That's already clear. This test is something much harder. Can we live with that clarity every single day? Can we wake up tomorrow and trust again? Can we respond differently, consistently? Can we take a moment of seeing and turn it into a way of being? That's the move from Bina to Das. And that's where most of us get stuck. We understand, we learn, we have moments of clarity, but it doesn't last. We go right back to reacting the same way, thinking the same way, feeling the same way. And the reason is because we're missing one half of the system. There are people who think we can grow without mitzvos. We'll work on our mindset, our connection, our awareness, but without structure, nothing holds. It doesn't last under pressure. And then there are people who keep mitzvos carefully, and we assume that's the goal. We're doing what we're supposed to do, but if it's not changing us, if we're not becoming more trusting, more giving, more aligned, then something is missing. And this is why the Torah is written the way it is. The stories show us what alignment looks like. Abraham is what chesed, giving, looks like when it's lived. Yitzchak is what gavor, discipline, and restraint look like. Yaakov is what truth, emes, looks like when a person is navigating a complicated reality. These are not just people to admire, they're models to become. And the mitzvos are what build that person. They take the clarity from that moment at the sea and turn it into something we live in the wilderness, day after day, choice after choice, reaction after reaction. So the goal is not just to keep the mitzvos, and it's not just to feel inspired. The goal is to become someone whose entire way of living is aligned with what we know to be true. That's the move from Bina to Das, and that's why the Torah had to be written with both law and narrative, because one without the other doesn't work. Without the stories, we don't know what we're becoming. Without the mitzvos, we never become it. So the question to leave with is not, do we understand the Torah? And not even, are we keeping the Torah? The real question is the Torah changing how we experience our lives? Are we still standing at that moment of clarity? Or are we building a life where that clarity becomes who we are?
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.